Welcome to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. I'm Brian Gorman, and I will be chairing this meeting. The meeting will be recorded by Westwood Media Center. If anyone else wishes to record the meeting, please identify yourself so the audience is aware. Seeing none. As a friendly reminder, please turn off your cell phone ringers. The meeting will be civil and all people will be treated respectfully. This includes no clapping, booing, or interruptions from the audience. In the event of a disruption, the chair will give a warning the first time, and if it occurs again, the individual will be requested to leave the meeting. So this is a meeting where we have one item on the agenda. So we're going to discuss the open meeting law complaints that were received by the planning board. I will begin. So on February 5th, Town Planner Abby McCabe provided me with two open meeting violation complaints against the planning board that were received in her office. I asked Abby McCabe to provide the complaints to members of the planning board, and then I followed up with an email with those two complaints. And the complaints were also provided to the planning board tonight. I also have copies if anybody wishes to have some. In the response to the complaints, I amended the agenda on February 11th, 2020 to ensure that this matter was brought to the attention of the planning board and to schedule this evening's meeting. Given that this is a time-sensitive matter that is governed by the Massachusetts general law and a response is required from the board to the Massachusetts Attorney General, it's important that we address these complaints this evening. So in furtherance of addressing the pending open meeting law complaints, I'd like to now turn to and recognize Chris Paff to provide evidence to support the allegations in his complaint that there must have been prior discussion among the three members who voted in favor of the motion on January 28th, and that members Conant, DeLay, and Gorman violated the Massachusetts open meeting law by conducting deliberations on an item not on the agenda.
As I understand it, this meeting is, the purpose is for the planning board to draft a response to the complaints. All of my statements in my complaint are my statements, and I live by those.
So is there any evidence to support beyond what you've provided?
What I provided is what I'm providing.
Okay. And now, for the same previously stated reasons, I'll recognize Dave Atkins to provide evidence to support the allegations in his complaint that between the planning board meeting on January 21st, 2020, and a special meeting called at the request of Chair Brian Gorman for January 28th, 2020, I believe three board members, Chair Gorman, Vice Chair Deborah Conant, and William DeLay, violated the open meeting law prohibition against deliberation by a quorum of members outside a public meeting.
So similar to what Chris said, my complaint contains the basis for this. It's based upon what I observed during the meeting and watched on the video. I don't know if there's other evidence outside of the meeting. If there were, I would have included it in the complaint. It's all based on what we observed during the meeting in terms of how quickly the matter was raised, seconded, voted on, and not notified in the agenda.
So Special Town Counsel Lauren Goldberg will prepare a response to the Attorney General on behalf of the Planning Board. When a draft of the response is available, a copy will be forwarded to each member of the Planning Board for their review, and I will schedule a meeting of the board to allow the board to publicly review and approve the proposed response to the Attorney General. And if others would like to speak, given the opportunity.
Sure.
So I guess, thank you. I would,
Do we Do we have special counsel, Attorney Goldberg here? Do you want, she's
If
here
you'd like
for
to-
the board, so if
if
you
you'd like
could
to make a
ask her
statement.
to guide you through this a little more.
Thank you. Yeah, typically at this stage, what the board would do is discuss what it would like the response to state, and then I prepare something that is responsive to that. Oftentimes, the vote to resolve the matter, however the board determines is appropriate by a majority of those present and voting, would be the resolution, and then I would I would type up a response that just reflects the vote that you all take. You may, because of the timing, we do have until next Friday. We were able to get an extension as we discussed. We do have till next Friday to send a response. So if you wanted to meet again, you certainly could. But if the board were to resolve this matter tonight, I can type up a response. You can, the chair can approve it and we can send it in. It's up to you how you want to handle that. But typically, there would be a motion to resolve by either saying, yes, we think the complaints are correct, we think they're incorrect, so we deny them, or we deny them and, we think X, Y, or Z things should or should not be done. The decision as to how to respond is completely within the board's discretion and vote. So, that isn't something that as counsel that I would direct. You have the ability to resolve this however you think is appropriate. And if the complainants are dissatisfied with that response, they can take that to the Attorney General for further review.
Okay. Sure.
Good evening, Ernest Horn and Attorney O'Laughlin, representing Brian Gorman, the chairman. So we'll provide our client with our thoughts now that we've had this meeting, now that we understand there's virtually no information supporting these allegations. They appear to be baseless. So we will provide our client with a recommendation on how his thoughts should be reflected in the answer that's sent to the Attorney General's office.
Thomas O'Laughlin, I'm an attorney, I represent Mr. Gorman as well. You're not required to take a vote at all concerning this matter. Each one of you had the opportunity to speak, you spoke. So council can draw whatever decision, bring it back to you, and you either approve it or don't approve it to go to the Attorney General. And that's the bottom line. You're not required to adopt one position or the other. And it's very difficult to do when you have complainants on the same board as you have the people that are being complained about. That's much different than someone that's sitting home, a member of the general public, complaining about a board's action. So in this case, Mr. Chairman, you're not obligated to call for a vote. If someone wants to pose one, you're obligated to allow them to do that. But you're not obligated to take a vote to reach a conclusion. That's for counsel to draw up an opinion based on what she heard tonight and present that to you to go to the Attorney General.
Yeah, I would prefer that.
I appreciate what previous counsel has raised. I do want to point out that similar to the role that town council would play in this situation, I'm not here to represent any particular board member, and I don't have any interest in any particular board member's position being pushed forward. I think particularly where we all recognize that the situation here is somewhat unusual, it's highly unlikely that, that council should be the one to figure out whether there was or was not a violation of the open meeting law. I am in no place to know that. And so, again, I think it's up to the board to make a determination about whether it does or does not believe that the open meeting law is violated. I work with many cities and towns on matters like this, and I actually do, unfortunately, sit in this spot with council members also, with board members also making complaints. Ultimately, if the board doesn't choose to resolve this one way or another, then no response will go to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General can take action on that. But I don't see, and under the circumstances, that I'm supposed to weigh the evidence that's being presented as to whether I think it's a violation of the open meeting law. That isn't the role that I see for myself. I do think the board has to take a vote on that, and if the board doesn't, that's fine. It doesn't mean the board has to take a vote on it right now. I'd certainly be happy to draw up some optional decisions for you, decisions if you think the law wasn't violated, decisions if you think the law was, and you guys can decide which of those that you believe is the most appropriate. But I don't think it's my place to make a policy decision for the board in this matter.
And I agree with my sister. She does not have to reach a conclusion because the board hasn't. There's a complaint. There were questions asked, what the evidence was, and that's what can be presented to the Attorney General. You're not required to present to the Attorney General a denial or admittance. You're required to answer the complaint. And if answering the complaint is to simply say, here's what the board said this evening, that's it. And then the Attorney General will deal with it as they may. So this isn't, we have to reach a conclusion here. The conclusion gets reached there, not here. So it's a matter of this board looking at what was said this evening, what was said in the complaints, and does counsel meet that? If she does, then she's accomplished what she's supposed to accomplish in referring it to the Attorney General. The complainants then have a right, once you respond as a board, to bring their complaint to the Attorney General 30 days later, and the AG will make a decision. So there's no need for you to vote. There's no need for you to move this one way or the other over the middle line. You're not the one that's going to judge whether or not there was or was not a violation. That's the Attorney General's responsibility.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
Certainly if the board takes no vote, then that's what will be reported. My role is not to make that decision for you. If you make a decision, then that's what will be reported. If you do not make a decision, then that's what will be reported on behalf of the planning board. As I said, I don't represent any one particular person's position, represent the board as a whole to respond to the complaint, and that's what I'll do. I feel as though it is the normal course, in my experience, for a board to take a position. That doesn't mean this board has to. And I believe that, the number of situations that I've seen boards dealing with the Attorney General on, typically the ones that the board resolves itself, makes a determination about how to handle it, whether it believes there is or is not a violation, and whether there should or should not be any remedial action, or whether there should or should not be any action taken, regardless of whether there's a violation. That is typically the kind of discussion that is had at a meeting like this, not just is the evidence presented sufficient, because the idea of the open meeting law is to try and say the public deserves the right to listen to the board's deliberations. And so the public doesn't necessarily have information about what board members do that aren't at the table. So you have complaints in front of you, they have evidence in them, whether you think that's evidence that proves something is something else, but they, in and of themselves, they meet the requirements from the of an open meeting law complaint. So at this point, it seems to me, and again, I have no problem coming back. I have no problem preparing a letter for you that says, these were the questions that were asked, these were the responses that were given, no vote was taken. That's fine. But I'm not certain whether you want to come back to have another discussion about the same thing. We could have done this a couple of weeks ago too, to the same end.
We didn't have the board members at that point in time.
I even mean at the original meeting. It's not a criticism, because this is your board and your town, and believe me, I understand that. It's just an observation. If there isn't going to be more of a discussion, then it seems to me then I should be authorized tonight to write a letter to the Attorney General that says, these questions were asked, these were answers that were given, here's a link to
The board would want to see what you wrote and review it, and then agree that that should get sent on.
So, and that's fine. That's of course that's fine. You know, if you want to come back and have that discussion again. Otherwise, you just authorize me to do that tonight. I send a draft to the chair.
I'd
The chair
definitely
approves.
want to see your draft and have all the board members see the draft, review it, and then vote to move it forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Then, but then that is the letter that I will be drafting. These are the questions that were asked. There was no vote taken. I received direction to prepare the response, and then you guys will take a look at it. Because there's no vote, you know, for me to. Well, I need to be authorized to draft something. You know, otherwise,
You can draft what they said.
I said I would.
But the fact of whether a vote was taken or not taken is their decision. So it's irrelevant.
It is, I will draft a letter
Might be
that
relevant
in
to
my,
you, But it's irrelevant.
sir, I'm gonna go through the chair. I'm sorry.
Well, Mr. Chairman, whether or
Yes.
not a vote was taken is irrelevant.
Then why don't
Because
you
the board
come?
didn't take a vote. The board
Yeah.
didn't propose a vote.
Or if you want to, only because the folks at home.
From our perspective, to cite the fact of whatever was discussed here at this meeting is relevant. And that should be sent to the Attorney General, not an issue. Whether or not a vote was taken because special counsel believes a vote should have been taken is irrelevant. That has nothing to do with your business. Nobody here made a motion, nobody here seconded a motion, there was no vote. So to raise it, it's irrelevant.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, I will do the board's bidding as I was planning to do from the start because I'm here to represent the board. Whatever
you.
the board wants is what the board will get. And I have, as I said, I've had significant experience in this area with boards that do and do not like the outcomes and board members that do and do not like the outcomes of discussions of this nature. So that's what I will do, and then you will decide. And if there's language that you don't like and the board decides to strike the language, then the board will decide that. In fact, I'm happy to prepare the letter as from the board instead of from council, if that would be preferable. Certainly, I'd be happy to.
Sure.
Very brief. I just have a slight disagreement. Well, first, let me back up. Probably the people at home are saying, geez, those two lawyers are related to each other? They're sister and brother? That's a common term that lawyers use. She's my sister, but we're not related. So I have a minor objection to what my sister said. She said that evidence that was provided tonight. There was no evidence provided tonight. There has been no evidence provided. There has been nothing but assumptions by two individuals that filed almost identical complaints on the same day. There has been no evidence provided. No evidence was provided tonight. And I just want to make sure that I cleared that up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I would recommend the board discuss this tonight, since this was the purpose of the special meeting, was to review and discuss so you can give direction for Attorney
I think
Goldberg to
we have
draft.
given direction, so we're
Well,
okay.
in terms of the content of a resolution.
We have. So we'd like to
Hi,
speak.
good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thomas Ralph, I represent Deborah Conant. Just for clarification for my purposes, I had sent a letter to the town on February 11th to the town administrator, also CC to the chair of the planning board, requesting any additional information that the town or any of its members had in its possession concerning the open meeting law violation that was alleged. I've read the complaints, and they just state it's their belief that these things happened. So just for my purposes of clarifying everything tonight, there's no additional emails, there's no other documentation in the possession of any member on this board that references OML, either between themselves or other entities within the town that would be relevant for purposes of responding. Yes, no? Anybody have anything in their possession? No? Are the minutes of the meetings from that night publicized yet? Are they all approved and voted on?
No.
No. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and now I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? So the meeting's closed.